All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video. If you're on a smaller screen like a phone, if you're on a larger screen like a desktop computer, something like that, should be to the right of the video. Let me refresh this. I'm not seeing any new questions in there as of yet. Everything I'm seeing right now is from the last office hours. Yeah, so no new questions as of yet. So get your questions in there, and we'll get going here. If you're just hopping on the office hours, I'm just waiting for a question to be asked. We don't have any new questions in there right now. So if you got questions, it's a good time to ask. If not, no worries. I'll just be taking care of the other work I got to do. All right. So got a question here. It says, how do you stay in your posture on the downswing? So typically when I see people come out of their posture, it's usually because they're reacting to how their club is moving in the transition. That's usually what I see. So let's talk about what that means. If you're starting down steep in the start of the downswing, we'll have Hazel get up here. If you're starting down steep in the start of the downswing, so I'm going up to the top here, and then when I start my downswing, this club comes down in a more vertical way. What's typically going to happen is most recreational golfers, in order to get this club to shallow out and work back on plane, what we'll do is we'll stand up out of it. So we're reacting to that club coming down steep in the start of the downswing. And because of that, right, if I stand up out of it, now look what happens to that club. Now that club is in a position that I can attack that ball from the inside. If I'm starting down steep and I stay in my posture and continue to rotate, I'm just going to come down way over the top. You're not going to hit good golf shots when you do that. So, and just to bear in mind, I would much rather have the golfer that comes up out of their posture and shallows out the club than the golfer that stays in their posture, even though staying in your posture is good, but we have to be doing the things that allow us to stay in our posture, right? So I'd much rather have the golfer that stands up out of it, shallows out the club, gets the club working down on plane, than the golfer that comes over the top and comes and stays in their posture, because that person that comes over the top and stays in their posture, they're going to hit bad golf shots. They're going to be very inconsistent. They're going to hit slices. They're going to hit pulls. They're going to hit hooks. It's just going to be very, very difficult to be consistent when you do that. And that's if you're able to make good contact with the ball. It's difficult to make good contact with the ball when you do that. So what we want to make sure that we're doing is we want to make sure that we're getting that club to shallow out as we start down. So that way we're incentivized to we're actually incentivized to stay in our posture, right? Because now I can stay in my posture and rotate, and that club's going to be nicely down on plane. Right. So if you're struggling with staying in your posture, we actually have two great courses that can help you with this. The first course is the 20-minute posture fix, right? The 20-minute posture fix. I would like you to start with that one because it kind of encapsulates some of the shallowing that I talked about. Because there's a great drill that Clay does in the beginning where you choke way down on the club to really get the extreme sense of staying in your posture. I love that drill to help you to kind of get the feel of your body being closer to the ground. It helps you to understand, are you physically capable of staying in your posture? There's some great stuff in there. So that's a course that I'd recommend. And then to really hone it in, to get to where we're really good at shallowing out the club, because Clay goes over shallowing some in that 20-minute posture fix. But we really dive into it a lot more and more concentrated in the 20-minute shallowing fix. So getting that club to shallow out early in the start of the downswing. So those two courses right there will really help you to stay in your posture. If you're someone who's doing this move in the downswing, that I see it a lot, amongst the players that I do lessons with and things like that. So check those out. You can get to either one of those by clicking the instruction tab at the top of the screen there, and then clicking the, from the drop down there, there's going to be the 20-minute posture fix, and there's going to be the 20-minute shallowing fix. Like I said, I would go to that 20-minute posture fix first. And if you're having trouble with the shallowing portion of the 20-minute posture fix, it may be good to go to the 20-minute shallowing fix and get better at doing that, and then go back to the 20-minute posture fix to help you with that. But those would be the two courses that will really help you to stay in your posture, cover the ball, compress the ball, and help you to play some a lot more consistent golf. All right, so we got a question here from Charles H. Says, I tend to hit long approach shots off the toe of the club. What am I doing wrong? Hard to say without seeing your swing, but if you tend to hit the ball off the toe, I would just change your intention to hitting the ball off of the heel. Change your intention. Right now, you're trying to hit, your intention is hit the ball in the center of the face, but the reality of what's going on is you're hitting it on the toe. So I would change your intention to hitting it off the heel, and that will move the strike to the center of the face. And if you actually hit it off the heel, you can just tone it down. If you still hit it off the toe, exaggerate it more. I would feel like you're trying to hit a hosel rocket. Right? I know that can be a difficult thing to do, but just commit to it, because a lot of times, commit to it in your practice. Get to where you can do it in your practice. It's going to be tough to commit to it on the course because those hosel strikes, those can be very detrimental. But if you do it on the range, you can get more comfortable with it. And then if you do more reps with it, what will likely happen is your strike will actually start moving more toward the heel. And at that point, you're calibrated, right? Because your reel or your feel is matching the reality of what's happening. So that would be one thing I would do. Now, there are some things that I see that happen that can lead to toe strikes. And the most common thing is kind of an over-the-top kind of swing, right? So if I'm coming over the top, right, what's going to tend to happen is that club, as it's working through the impact zone, is going to be working toward me, right? So when the speed spot is working toward me through the impact zone, you're going to tend to hit the ball off the toe. Not always, but you're going to tend to hit the ball off the toe. And that could be what's happening. So look at your swing on video and see if you're kind of coming over the top. See if that club's kind of going outside your hand. See if you can see that club working from outside that outside to in through impact, and that would likely be the problem that's going on. Now, something that I see, one thing that you mentioned there was with the longer clubs, right? On hit long approach shots, right? So with longer clubs, what I often see, especially for golfers hitting shots off of the ground, the longer clubs, I often see golfers push that ball position really far forward, right? So when you're hitting shots off the ground, we need to be able to get the bottom of the swing to be in front of the ball. So if you put that ball position really far forward, that may lend to you coming over the top in an effort to make ball first contact, right? Because think about it this way. If I were to swing way from the inside, where's my club going to bottom out at? My club's going to bottom out more toward my trail foot. If I swing way over the top, my club's going to bottom out more in front of my lead foot, right? So if I have my ball position, right, if I put my ball position way up here off of my lead foot, right, I may tend to come over the top and have my club working out to in through contact to get to that ball in order to not chunk it. Because if I swing from the inside, I'm going to have a hard time making ball first contact. If I do make ball first contact, I'm probably not going to be able to hit the ground because I'm going to be hitting up on it, right? So you may be coming over the top in an effort to make ball first contact, and then that leads to toe strikes, right? So if you're hitting shots off the ground, I like to see ball position middle to just forward in the middle of the stance for most golfers. You could go a little bit more forward of that, but if you're tending to, chunk the ball, thin the ball, or things like that, I would move that ball position, more toward the middle to help you to be able to make more ball first contact. Now, if you're hitting your driver, you're hitting your driver, it's teed up, right? We don't really want to put the ball position there because we're going to we're going to have a hard time getting good distance. So if it's happening with your driver, then we just need to shallow out the club more with the driver. Get to where we're working that club from the inside better with the driver, and that should help you to get those strikes more in the center of the face. So, like I said, try to hit the ball off the heel. That would be like the first and foremost. That's going to help most likely, no matter what the issue is, the technical issue is. But the most common technical issue is an over-the-top swing that leads to toe strikes. So that's what I'd be looking at. Another common thing is standing too far away from the ball. It's possible that you might be, with the longer clubs, maybe you're standing too far away from it. So getting to where your arms are kind of hanging more, straight down, right? We're more in this area as opposed to like this. It's not that you can't hit good shots from here, but if you're hitting toe strikes, it's probably going to be easier to stand a little bit closer to it. Now with the driver, we're going to reach a little bit for it because the club's so much longer than all the other clubs. But for the most part, all the other clubs, we want the hands to be kind of hanging straight down. They're going to be about fist width in front of your legs here. That's typically going to be a good spot for it. All right, keep the questions coming. We got plenty of time here. All right, can older golfers gain club head speed and distance? Yes, absolutely. So I'm not sure if you're familiar, but we have this course that's called the 20-minute distance fix. And we've had golfers of all ages gain tons of distance using that. So yes, absolutely. The key to remember here is that, let's say you're 60s, 70s, 80s, right? You're an older golfer, right? And you're looking to gain club head speed. You can absolutely gain club head speed. It's just that if you were doing this stuff when you were in your 20s, you would have gained more speed, right? So it's not that you can't gain club head speed when you get older. It's just that you're not going to gain your top speed isn't going to be near as much as it was when we were younger. And there's reasons for this, right? As we get older, we lose some strength, right? As we get older, we lose some flexibility. And we lose strength through our range of motion, a big range of motion, right? And that can lead to some distance loss, right? So that's really the idea that we want to have there, right? So really what we want to do is we just want to stick to the fundamentals to help you to create speed. So really the number one thing is getting a bigger turn. And if you're not someone who's flexible, you want to make sure that you flare out those feet. Clay talks about this actually in the 20-minute distance fix in week 1 of the 20-minute distance fix there. So we want to flare the feet, let my trail leg straighten out, let my left knee move in, let my left heel come off the ground. Allow yourself to free up your legs. I see a lot of older golfers who don't move their legs. They don't let their legs move. And that could be because of, stigmas from, instruction, in the early 2000s where we said we want to have that X factor, where we're keeping our legs locked. And that's not really what we want to do. We want to create that X factor. We're going to have the X factor no matter what, meaning when we say X factor, that's a term, coined by Jim McLean. He had that book a long time ago, and it was misinterpreted. I think what a lot of people thought with that book, what was going on there, what people said, lock your hips and then create that X factor here. But we want to create that X factor, but we don't want to lock up the hips. We're going to have that X factor, that separation of the hips and the rib cage. We're going to have that X factor even if we turn our hips. The most common thing that I see with older golfers who don't have club head speed is they don't turn their hips. They keep their hips pretty stagnant. They keep their legs kind of locked, right? We want to free up our legs, let our legs move. That's going to allow you to turn really, really well. So that would be the number one thing that I would look at if I was an older golfer, is just trying to get a bigger turn and getting a bigger turn through my hips. If we can do that, that will unlock things for you and allow you to create more club head speed. Because the more space and time I have to create club head speed, the more club head speed I can generate at the bottom, right? So if I'm only making a swing that's like this, it's going to be hard for me to generate a lot of speed. But if I'm winding up, I'm letting my hips turn, I'm letting my heel come off the ground, right? That's going to allow me to really be able to create a bigger turn. So flaring those feet, letting the trail leg straighten out, letting that lead knee flex and move in, that's going to help you to really turn your hips. One thing that you can do to kind of make sure that you're getting a good hip turn, and this is just a bonus. Clay doesn't talk about this in the 20-minute distance fix, but this is something that I like to have students do who are struggling with the turn. Take an alignment stick. You can get one of these at any home improvement store. Take an alignment stick, put it through your belt loops, right? So this is going to be a really good feedback mechanism for how much my hips are turning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another alignment stick, or you can use a club, and I'm going to put this down on the ground between my feet here, and I want to have it at about a 45-degree angle. And what I want to do is I want to turn my hips to match that, right? I want to make sure that when I'm going to the top of my swing here, that my hips, the stick on my hips are matching that or going past that, right? So you can see there, I'm got my feet flared. I got my right leg straightening out. I got my left knee moving in and is flexed. I got my left heel coming off the ground a little bit. That's what I got to do. If I set up pigeon-toed, right, and I lock up my legs, that's as much as I can turn my hips, right? So if I flare my feet and I free up my legs, that really allows me to turn a lot better, right? So that's really going to be the major key for a lot of older golfers to help you to create some speed. And again, as long as you can flare out your feet and let your legs straighten out, let your legs move, you can create more club head speed. I see golfers do it all the time. But if you want to check out the best course to help you to create club head speed, I would check out our 20-minute distance fix. If you haven't already, you can find the course by clicking the instruction tab at the top of the screen. And then from there, the drop-down menu there, you'll see the 20-minute distance fix. Get started on those drills and start gaining some distance. I tell you what, there's no better way for most golfers to improve their golf game than adding distance. It just makes playing golf a lot easier. So check that out. All right, keep the questions coming here. We got, time is it? We got about 35 minutes left here. All right, sounds like we got a question. So we got a question here from Charlie. It says, hi, Q. Any subtle difference in hitting a 3-wood versus hitting a 19-degree hybrid? Not really. You're going to hit them the same way. There really isn't much of a difference at all. So the difference. So because a 19-degree has more loft, you're generally going to always hit it like an iron, right? A 3-wood, you have a little bit of options, right? That's really where the only subtle difference is, right? So if you're hitting the ball off of the tee, right, you can hit it similarly to the way you hit your driver. You'll tee it up a little bit and hit up on it. Obviously, you wouldn't tee it up as high as your driver because you don't want to make yourself susceptible to like a pop-up, or something like that. But you would tee it up to where maybe about half of the ball is above the crown of the club, right? And you can hit up on it and you can get that higher launch, lower spinning 3-wood shot that, because that would be, there's not a lot of situations where you might do that. So actually with Scotty Scheffler, I was watching him at the Memorial. I think it was the 18th hole, right? He hit a 3-wood on that hole, and he hit a 3-wood because if he hits driver, it's bringing a bunker into play that he just didn't want to go into, right? and he would just rather be 20 yards back and be in the fairway and not have to worry about, it gives him a bigger, a bigger, dispersion for him to be able to hit a ball into and be okay. Whereas if he hit the driver, he would have a smaller window to hit into. Now it would have been helped him to get up there farther, right? Might have been a slightly easier second shot, but for him, he would just rather get that three wood up there. Another situation where you might do that would be like, let's say you have a hole where there's a creek that kind of goes through the middle, and let's say your driver gets to the creek, but your three wood doesn't, right? So that might be a situation where you would hit your three wood similarly to how you would hit your driver. It would just go a little, not quite as far, because it's a little bit shorter club. There's going to be a little less speed there. There's a little bit more loft there. So it's just not going to go, quite as far. So that's essentially, what it comes down to. That's the subtle difference, I would say. When you're hitting it off the ground, I would say there's not really any difference at all. But when you're hitting it off the tee, you have options, right? Now, I do. I have hit my three wood, or not my three wood, my hybrid, my 19-degree hybrid. I have hit that similarly to the way that I would hit a driver, and it was just kind of a one-off scenario. So there's a course that's near me. It's the Winter Park 9 here in Florida. It's just a fun little 9-hole course, and it's kind of an executive style course. It's got par threes, par fours, and par fives, but they're all very short. Everything's pretty short. So this particular par four is like 240, 230 yards, but there's trees that block the green, and you can get to it. You just have to hit a really high ball to get to it. Now, if I hit my normal, I can hit my hybrid in that 230 to 240 range, as long as I'm not hitting into the wind. Usually that hole is a little bit downwind, so it helps a little bit. So I'm pretty comfortable hitting my hybrid on that hole, and I can get my hybrid to go that distance. But the normal trajectory of my hybrid would not get up over these trees. So what I do is I tee the ball up a little bit higher, and I play the ball a little bit forward in my stance, and I actually hit up on my hybrid to try to get it to launch super high. And it's just a fun shot. If I was playing in a tournament, I probably wouldn't do that because that's not a shot I practice very much. I just do it on that hole for fun. Because it's more fun to like go for the green, right? So that would be a situation where I would do that. But generally, you're not going to really do that. There's not a ton of situations where we're going to do that very often. So Cal Bear says, at the moment of impact, is the lead leg fully straightened, or does it not fully straighten until the straight line release? It's not. When you look at the best players, it's typically not fully straightened until even after the straight line release. It's usually shortly after that. A lot of times, it's when the club is parallel to the ground. Is typically in the follow through. So that's going to be after the release, because there's your release. And then that's typically when you're going to see that lead leg straightening out. But there are some players that do have that. So if you look at Brooks Koepka, his lead leg is basically fully straightened out when he comes into contact. So you can play excellent golf with a fully straightened out lead leg. In most situations that I see, it's not a good thing to do, because essentially what's happening there is if your leg is straightened out already, it's what's called running out of leg. Right. So what that means is that I don't really have much else to keep my body rotating. Right. So if I straighten out my leg, it's harder to me to keep rotating. Right. Whereas if I have some flex in my leg, I continue to straighten out my leg to keep my body rotating. Right. What's generally going to get your body rotating after you straighten your leg is the momentum of your body. So it's just kind of like your arms and the club kind of coming through. So if you watch someone like a Brooks Koepka, you'll see how basically his lead leg is straight, almost straight, or it may be straight or very, very close to straight at impact. His body actually stalls a little bit until the club kind of gets back in front of him, and then the arm and his club kind of bring him all the way around, right? So you can be successful in doing that. It's just that most golfers that I see who have that straight leg at impact, usually their hips are square to the ball at impact, and it's usually kind of a flippy motion because their body's just completely stalling. So generally, it's not a good thing to do. And Clay actually talks about this. I believe it's in the power turn course when he talks about releasing the club with the legs. I believe it's level 2 or 3 of the power turn course. Let me actually look that up because I always forget what course that's in. Release. So I'm just going on here. And if you're ever looking for a video on a specific topic, the search engine on the website actually works really well. So I knew exactly what I was looking for. I searched release legs and found this video. So yeah, it's level 2 of the compression line. So I wasn't even right. Level 2 of the compression line course is where Clay talks about releasing with the legs. And he discusses how the legs aren't going to be straightening out until later when you look at most players. But like I said, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a death move, but most golfers that I see generally aren't going to have that leg. It's going to be straightening, right? It's straightening into impact, but it's not dead. It's not completely locked out at impact. It's usually that happens just after the release, usually, when you look at most of the best golfers. All right, we got about 30 minutes left here. All right, is there a wrong way to shallow out the club? I wouldn't say necessarily a wrong way, but there are less efficient ways to shallow out the club. And the ways that we shallow out the club that aren't efficient are basically standing up out of the posture. So if we're here, right, if I'm starting down steep, I can do this to shallow out the club. Now that is a way to shallow out the club, and I would much rather you do that than to continue to come down steep. But that's not going to be the most efficient way. The reason is that if I have to come up out of my posture to do it, I'm going to tend to early release, and that's just not going to be a very consistent ball flight. I'm going to tend to hit the ball thin. I'm going to tend to have kind of a weaker ball flight. I'm not going to compress the ball as much. Things like that. I'm going to have a little bit more trouble controlling my face and path relationship, right? Because if I stand up out of it, my face is just going to be turning over very quickly, harder to control, right? But like I said, I would much rather have the golfer that does that than the golfer that continues to come down steep and stay in the posture, right? So that's one. Another one is dropping the right shoulder. This is something that I see a lot of people because it's a very intuitive thing to do where you get to the top and I think I got to make the club do this. So what a lot of people do is they do this number, right? Where they drop that right shoulder. And again, that kind of chili dip move, that can lead to some issues. That's typically going to lead to a chunk shot, drop kick, hook kind of shot. So again, not the best way to do it. It is a way to shallow out the club, but it's usually not going to be the most consistent way to do it. When you look at the best players, typically what they do is they shallow out the club with the upper body, and then they actually steepen the club with the lower body. And what does that mean? Well, that means that if I'm rotating my body, right, that's actually going to steepen the club. That's going to make my club go this way. So I have to do things with my arms and my wrists and my spine, right, to make sure that club is coming down in a good spot, right? So body rotation, that's what we see the best golfers do. That actually steepens the club. We have to accompany that with shallowing moves with the upper body. So what are the shallowing moves with the upper body? Well, one is this is not required. And again, these are all levers that you can pull, right? It doesn't mean you have to be doing all of these. You kind of have to come up with your own recipe of things that work the best for you. But one is bowing the lead wrist and extending the trail wrist. You can see if I do that, how that shallows out the club. Now, the good part about this one is it actually does two things. It also closes the club face, because if I bow my wrist, you can see how that's going to close my club face. So getting the club face more closed and shallow that's really going to help you to be able to rotate and get the hands in front. Now, like I said, not every golfer needs to do this, right? But it is an option out there, and there's a reason why you see a lot of pros do it, and it's because of that reason. It does those two things for you, whereas all these other things for shallowing moves aren't going to also close the face as well. They're just going to shallow out the club, right? So bowing the lead wrist, extending the trail wrist, that's the first one. And I'm going from the wrist, working to the forearms, and I'm just working my way through the body here. The next one is forearm rotation, right? So if you're a right-handed golfer, you can think of turning a doorknob to the right. That shallows out the club, right? So this is turning a doorknob to the right. I'm isolating my elbows to my side. So this is just forearm rotation. You can see how much I can move the club with forearm rotation. Pretty much every golfer to shallow out the club is going to be doing some amount of forearm rotation to get the club shallow, right? The next piece is from my shoulder joint. And this is not to be confused with dropping the shoulder. Dropping the shoulder is usually going to come from a hip bump and then some right side bend for a right-handed golfer that's happening too early in the swing. That's typically where that right shoulder dropping is going to come. That's the shoulder moving is coming from my body moving. The shoulder joint itself is moving my arm. So if I have external rotation in my trail shoulder, right, that you can think of that as losing an arm wrestling contest, that's going to shallow out the club. Most of that's going to be happening in the backswing, but you're going to be keeping that in the start of the downswing, right? And then internal rotation in my lead shoulder. So you can see if I do that, if I keep my shoulders level here and I just turn my shoulder joints, right, you can see how that shallows out the club. Lowering of my arms, that shallows out the club. If I go up to the top and I keep my arms up, I can do all those things, but I'm still going to come down steep. I need to lower my arms. So lowering my arms, that's something that shallows out the club. I actually saw a recent video of Bryson, right? And I thought he gave a great tip talking about shallowing out the club. He said, take your hands and put them in your right pocket, put them in your trail pocket. I think that's a great feel because it helps you to get the arms lowering and keeps the arms kind of more behind you, right? We don't want to lower them out here, right? Because that's going to be over the top. We're lowering, our body's opening up and we're lowering them to our pocket. So that helps you. I love that tip for shallowing out the club. So arm lowering, that is also one. And then right side bend. Now, the right side bend is a tricky one because it's a gradual thing that happens, right? What we don't want to do is go up to the top and then right side bend right away. That's that dropping of the right shoulder that I talked about. It's a gradual thing. You're going to be maxing out that right side bend as you come into contact, right? So it's gradual as you come into contact. But if I don't do it, right, because when I go up to the top, I'm in left side bend, right? If I stay in that left side bend, well, then I'm just going to come over the top, right? Even if I lower my arms, I'm going to more than likely come over the top. I'm gradually working toward that right side bend as I come into contact. So a good way to kind of feel this is to put a club on top of your shoulders here, go up to the top, have that, you're going to have that left side bend. And I want you to imagine like there's a laser coming out of this club and it's tracing a line that is parallel with my target, right? Parallel with my toe line here. And then in the downswing, it's the same thing. I'm going to imagine there's a laser coming out and it's tracing a line that's parallel with my toe line. If I go like this and then I drop early, right? Well, now I'm tracing a line that's like this. That is not parallel with my toe line. That's going way out this way. So that's a way to kind of help you get the feel of how the spine should be moving, should be tilting and moving throughout the swing. Now, these are all things that I would keep in mind. We actually have a course that is on shallowing out the club. These are all things that I would keep in mind as you're working through the course. So you can get to the 20-minute shallowing course by clicking the instruction tab at the top, and then from the drop down, you can click the 20-minute shallowing fix from there. But again, you don't have to be doing all of these things. Play around with it to find what works best for you. But there's typically going to be some amount of all of those things that's going to get you in that position. Now, if I max out all of them, right? If I max out everything, right? That's going to be too shallow, right? So we can't max out everything. There's going to be a little, if you look at the best players in the world, you're going to see different amounts of those things in their swings that help them to shallow out the club. So those would be the things that I would recommend doing to shallow out the club like the pros do. So Cal Bear says, on the downswing, is the lead hand pulling, or is the trail hand pushing, or is it a little bit of both? It's a little bit of both. It is both. Both of those things are happening. Now, you may need to feel something different, right? If you're getting your trail hand too much in there, throwing out the club, you may need to feel like your trail hand doesn't do anything. A lot of what golf is adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want, right? So if we're really struggling with that trail hand throwing out, you may need to feel like that trail hand does nothing, or you may want to actually feel like that trail hand stays back and that the left hand is kind of doing everything. And that may help you to have your trail hand do less. Because what's likely going to happen if you're coming down and you're doing a lot of this action, right? Then you may need to feel like it's just staying back and then the left hand's kind of turning through. There's a drill out there that you do with basically an open trail hand, right? If you're someone who struggles with that, where you can you don't put it on there, right? You don't wrap it around the club. You just put it on there like this. I actually have had people do this drill with, I don't know if you've seen those. There's actually a training aid out there. It's a baseball training aid for basically you put your hand on. It's just like a plank, a flat thing that you put your hand on, and it basically makes it so you can't wrap your hand or you can't even cheat it at all. And you put that on the club, and if you're someone who really struggles with getting that right hand in there, you can really hit some shots doing that. There's also the precision impact training aid that kind of forces that hand back. It's basically like a cast that goes on your hand, and when you extend your wrist back, it goes click, 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 and then it's basically holding that into that position, and it's forcing you to turn through the shot, keeping that trail hand in that position. I like that training aid to help get the feeling of how we need to be turning through the shot. Now, we need to be able to get to where we can do that without it, but it helps you to kind of get that. So I like that as a preliminary drill if you're someone who really struggles with keeping that wrist back. I prefer someone do the stick drill, right? So the stick drill where we put the alignment stick on there, right, like this. And if I flip my wrist, it's going to smack me in the side. If you're someone who does this drill and you've really tried it, you've even tried going really slow with it and doing like half swings, right? But you just can't keep that from flicking through, then I'd try that precision impact and get the sense of doing that, and then try this, and then try going to the stick drill again with your body learning how to do that. Because the precision impact, I like it, but it has its limitations. It's not like we can just put it on and we're going to just know how to do it, right? Because what's happening is that when you put that on, it's forcing you to keep your hand back. Trust me, when you put that thing on, you're going to be trying to push your hands forward, but it won't let you because it's locked in, right? It's pretty strong. Like it's very, you can't really push through it, right? But once you take it off, if you just do the same thing, you're just going to flick your wrist, right? So I like it because it forces you and it helps your body understand what it needs to do. So it may make it easier to take the next level and do the stick drill. But if you can do the stick drill, I would just do the stick drill because that's not forcing you to keep your wrist back. You're still able to push your wrist through. It's just giving you feedback on whether you are or not, and you want to keep that stick from hitting you as you come through. All right, we got about 15 minutes left here. If we got any more questions. All right, how do you release the club correctly? Well, the short answer is to work through the top speed golf system, because all of the system is to get you to the last piece, which is where we work on the release. So first and foremost, we have to have a nice, stable, and fluid spine. And what does that actually mean? Well, at address, we want to be a little bit angled away, somewhere in that 6 to 8 degree range. A great way to get into that position: put the club down the middle of your body here, get in your address, and then tilt away until this just touches the inside of your leg. Now I'm in a perfect tilted away position. When I go up to the top, I want to remain in that angled away position, so that when I come into impact, it gets me into the position that's going to allow me to release the club, where I get more angled away. So I address, I'm a little bit angled away. I'm going to remain angled away when I get to the top, around 6 to 8 degrees. And then when I come into contact, I'm going to get more angled away, and that's going to help me to be in a position to be able to release this club out in front. If you're coming into contact and your body is straight up and down, I've seen some players where they get their body actually leaning toward, right, where they're going like this. It's fairly rare, but I do see that sometimes. You're going to have a really hard time releasing that club out in front. We need to be behind. We need to stay behind the ball a little bit. We don't. I'm not saying get way back here. Your nose is going to generally be on the ball or a little bit behind the ball, and we're going to be pushing away from that, and that's going to allow your body to rotate to release the club out in front. So that's the stable fluid spine course in the top speed golf systems. That's the first place that you want to go. The second thing is the power turn. Now, you may think, well, what does the power turn have to do with it? Well, I see this all the time. If we're not turning, if we're not getting a good power turn, we're going to try to get speed from somewhere. And what a lot of people do is they try to get speed from the wrist early. So what they'll do is they'll go up to the top, not a big turn, and then they'll think, well, I got to get power somehow. So what they'll do is they'll really start throwing out the club with the wrist. You can get a lot of speed from your wrist, right? And if you're swinging really short like that, you're going to have to really throw out those wrists to get any kind of speed. And if you throw out those wrists early, you're going to have an early release, right? And that's going to lead to inconsistency. We want to get that club releasing about 45 degrees out in front. And just backtrack a little bit. I forgot that I didn't talk about this. When we're talking about the release, what we're talking about here is where the club is splitting the forearms, right? So if I choke up on this club, where is this club going to be splitting my forearms? So you can see right there how the club is splitting my forearms there. I want that to be roughly about 45 degrees out in front. There's a good range that you want to be in, somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 to 55. That's where we found the best players are. We researched all the major winners of the last 25 years, and we found that the average was about 41 degrees on those, but the range was anywhere from 28 to 55. I always forget his name, the German golfer that won a couple majors several years ago. He was around 28. Martin Keimer, I always forget his name. Martin Keimer. He was about 28 degrees out in front. The 55 degrees was Dustin Johnson. All right, so anywhere in that range is going to be totally fine, but the average was around 40, 41. So like I said, power turn is a big part of it. And then the power turn is not just the backswing, it's also turning through the shot. So if we don't turn through the shot, we're going to have a hard time releasing that out front. If we go up to the top and then we just throw our arms, right, and we don't turn through it, we're not gonna get that club to release out in front either. So the power turn, I know it may not seem like it directly, but it does play a pretty big role in how you release the club. All right. The third piece of the top speed golf system is lag, right? So when we're talking about lag, what we want to see is this club kind of creating a sharper angle as we're coming down between my lead arm and the shaft, or maintaining the same. Right? It's either going to maintain the same angle or it's going to get sharper. If you're at the top of the swing and you're throwing this club out right away, you're going to tend to have an earlier release, right? So in order to get that club to release later, you're going to benefit from getting some lag. You're also going to be able to create more speed if you do that as well. So the top speed lag course, that can help you to create that lag in the start of the downswing to help you to be able to release the club out in front. The next piece is the compression line. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the compression line is the line that goes from my lead ankle, my lead hip, and my lead shoulder. If you imagine there's a line, going from my ankle all the way up to my shoulder, at impact, I want my compression line to be in a nice straight line here, and I want it to be either vertical or very slightly angled away from the target for an iron, for a shot that we're hitting off the ground. For a driver, I can be more angled away because that's going to promote more hitting up on it. And this is going to help you to be able to release the club properly, because if my hip is really bumped out like this, that's going to really stall my rotation. If my rotation of my body stalls, just like I talked about with the power turn, you're going to tend to release the club early, right? Because, you think about it this way: if I start swinging my arm and then I suddenly stop my arm, what's the club going to do? It's going to flip, right? So that's kind of the same thing. If I get here and I bump my hip out too much, and now I'm all jammed up in my hip here and I can't rotate, my body's going to stall and I'm going to throw my hands. So we want to have that. If we want to be able to turn through impact, we got to have that hip in a good alignment there to be able to rotate through, right? And also, if I'm too much toward the target, again, my spine angle, it's going to be hard to get that spine angle angled away to be able to release it out in front. So like I said, I want to be vertical for an iron or a little bit more angled away for a driver. That's going to allow me to be able to release that club out in front and be able to turn my body through. So we got to have those pieces in place. Once we have those pieces in place, now we're ready for the straight line release course, where we actually directly work on getting that club to release out in front. Lots and lots of drills to work through there. So there's two ways you can work through the system. You can either work through it by doing every course, because there's 3 levels in every course, right? And at the end of every level, there's a test that you want to make sure that you pass before you move on to the next level. So you want to work on one piece at a time. I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people make is that they try to work on like 3 different pieces of the system at the same time. I do not recommend doing that. That's too many swing thoughts, too many things that you're trying to do at one time. What you need to do is start in that order. It's in that order. It's stable fluid spine, power turn, lag, Russian line, straight line release. You can do level 1, level 2, level 3 of the stable fluid spine, and then go to the power turn, level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on and so forth, working through the system. That's one way you can do it. The other way that you can do it is you're starting in the stable fluid spine. You do level 1. You can do level 1 there, and then you can go to the power turn. You can do level 1 there, and you can do all the level 1s of each course, then go back to the stable fluid spine, do the level 2s of each course. So there's 2 ways that you can work through the system. Work on one piece at a time, put in the reps, make sure that you're passing the test, and then go on to the next one. But there's 2 ways that you can work through it. If you work through that system, you're going to be able to get that club to release out in front. So check it out. You click the instruction tab at the top there, and then you click the top speed golf system and get started on the drills from there. All right, so Eldo says, hi Q, would you be able to advise me as to where my hands should be at the top of the backswing, in front of my right shoulder, above the right shoulder, or behind the right shoulder? Thank you for your insight. Unfortunately, there isn't one place where your hands need to be at the top of the swing. If you look at the best players in the world, I mean, go look at the world golf rankings, right? And then if you look at those, look at the top 10 guys. Go search a down the line video on YouTube, and you're going to see their hands in different spots. They're not going to be in the same spot at the top of the swing, right? So there isn't one spot where the hands need to be at the top of the swing. So unfortunately, I can't advise you on that, because it's subjective to everybody. So here's how I would recommend. I wouldn't just think about, okay, where do my hands need to be at the top of the swing? I would think about what is actually wrong with your ball flight and contact, and then with that information, I would look at what technically needs to happen in your swing to improve that, right? And if that means moving your hands to a different place, then yeah, because there's pros and cons, right? You can have a more upright swing where your hands are like above your neck, right? You can have a more upright swing like that. The benefit of that would be you're going to create more space to be able to accelerate the club, and you might be able to hit the ball farther. The downside to that is it may make it more difficult to shallow out the club, because you're not creating a lot of depth, right? So if I'm like this, right, I've got to move my hands in the club in a way to get the club shallowing, right? There's lots of golfers that do this, right? Dustin Johnson does it. If you look at like a Justin Thomas, he does it. Tom Watson. like they all have very upright swings. Jack Nicklaus had a very upright swing, right? So upright swings are not a bad thing. You just have to be able, you create a lot of speed, a lot more speed from there, but you have to be able to get that club shallowing out, right? And then a flatter swing, right? Let's say you're like this, where your lead arm's kind of more across your shoulder here, right? Well, the benefit to that might be that you may find it easier to shallow out the club from there, right? Because you've got more depth. The club's a little bit more behind you to be able to shallow it, right? The downside to that is that you may lose some club head speed because you're not creating a lot of space to be able to accelerate the club, right? So really where your hands need to be at the top needs to be the happy medium that allows you to be able to get the club to work down nicely to get it to shallow out and work down on plane on the downswing, and high and as high as you can with that to be able to create speed. You got to find that happy medium that works the best for you. So like I said, there isn't one place where the hands need to be. It can be in a lot of places. You just have to find what works best for you. If you look at the best players, you're going to see them all over the place. You're going to see them very upright. You're going to see them flat. So you're going to see upright like a Dustin Johnson. You're going to see flat like a Matt Kuchar, and you're going to see an in between like Adam Scott, right? Everyone's kind of in between there. So you have to find what works best for you. All right, we got a couple minutes left here. If we got any more last minute questions, if not, no worries. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you all next time.